notice. But unfortunately for years, we fought for the NNPC to give that notice to people, to say now we have decided as a matter of national policy to be adding value to the crude oil trade. And so when you buy it, you specify where you want to go, and then you buy it on a cost and freight basis. And so then what would happen is that the NNPC would then be at liberty to nominate specific national carriers who would be able to give the freighting service in taking the crude from our shores to foreign refineries.
An important annexure in the Cabotage Act is the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund. What have you been told is causing the delay in the disbursement of this fund? But before you answer that, let me try and clear something. What is the size of the fund now? Do you know? I've heard figures ranging between 30 and 100 billion naira.
I absolutely have no idea what the size of the fund is at this point in time, but I know that a substantial collection has been done. Remember that before the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund was put in place, there was the Ship Acquisition and Shipbuilding Fund, and which allowed that a specific proportion of the freight of cargoes coming into the country was to be reserved. And so there was the SCSBF, and then after some time, there was also the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund, which I think is about 2% of inwards freight. So if you total up what has been collected under the SCSBF and the Cabotage Vessel Finance, it's a huge amount of money. So when you ask me the issue of disbursements, why do we not have it? I don't know why we haven't disbursed it. The money is collected for a specific purpose. It's collected for the purpose of a developing capacity in the industry. Shipping is a highly capital-intensive business, and in recognition of that characteristic of shipping, we set up this fund and created a situation where those who use shipping services locally will contribute. So what really should have been done would be to have a body that really evaluates people who want to buy ships, to have people apply, and then when you apply those criteria, if you pass, then you should be lent the money. I would like to go back again to the SCSBF and when it existed. If you remember, the SCSBF was administered by the old National Maritime Authority. I was a beneficiary of that fund. Myself and a number of Nigerian companies, I benefited to the tune of $2.5 million, which I was able to borrow to buy a ship. In terms of the pricing of vessels, $2.5 million is absolutely a pittance. But we utilized it and bought a fully built up, even though the ship was quite an old one at the time. We bought a Type SD-14 vessel, which we traded to India, we traded it to Brazil, we traded it to Europe, we traded it everywhere. If any purpose was served by that experiment, we absolutely learned how to operate ships through the means of that fund that we borrowed. By the way, we went on to pay the money that we had borrowed fully, to pay it back fully. We went on to own up to 7 vessels in our fleet, very old ships at that time. And if we were to say, what was the next steps from where we had been? We had demonstrated capacity. We had demonstrated that we could actually borrow the fund and return it. And what we would have expected would have been for the government to select those of us who had performed in that way and to have lent us something a little bit more substantial so that we could go out and buy newer vessels and in so doing, develop a capacity in the industry.
In your view, is NIMASA doing enough in the discharge of its mandate?
I can simply say that there is still a lot of work needing to be done. A lot of work needing to be done in terms of focusing the regulatory agency itself. If you read the news recently, or listened to the news, it was all over the place that NIMASA had bought a dry dock. And I asked myself the question, can an organization be a regulator as well as an operator in the industry? Can NIMASA be the regulator of technical standards in shipping and then become a ship operator itself? Because once you have bought a dry dock and you want to start operating dry docks, the next thing you will say, well, let us go and buy ships as well and operate. I think that those two duties and responsibilities must be put separated. You are a regulator, you have experts, and they regulate people who operate ships. You're a regulator, you have experts, you can regulate those who build and repair vessels. But actually to go out and buy one yourself, then you would be landed with responsibility for convening a faculty that would now be repairing vessels. We have the Niger Dock. That's why you need the private sector. So if you really needed to fund somebody, you could fund Niger Dock. If you needed to fund, you could fund the Continental Yard in NPA. Or you could say, all right, Captain Iheanacho, you know a lot about ships. Do you want to buy and operate a floating dock? And if I said yes, so you would support me to do it. But for NIMASA to go out and become a dry dock owner, will become a ship owner, will become a regulator of technical standards and safety standards in shipping, it will become an MOU signatory with the Nigerian Army, an MOU signatory with the Nigerian Navy, an MOU signatory with the Air Force, an MOU signatory with universities, various universities all over the place. What is it? There has to be focus in what one does. There has to be a proper definition in terms of what the duties and responsibilities of the regulatory agency would be. Otherwise, you'd be a jack of all maritime trades and you're a master of nothing. And that's not what we want.
What can we be doing to grow skilled manpower in the maritime industry, especially in shore-based technical training?
Again, you really ask a critical question there. We do have a maritime academy, ORON, which actually is supposed to develop a personnel who would eventually work on board ships. But I think that what that organization does, it's been so politicized that you have people calling for maritime ORON to be made a university, but they never listen to the argument when you say it wasn't meant to be a university. It was meant to be a specialist institution for developing people to IMO's STCW, that's Standard of Training and Certification of Watchkeepers standards. If you had a BSc and had a PhD in maritime engineering, it does not allow you to sail on board a ship as an engineer. What you need are specific skills that are recognized by the International Maritime Organization.